Hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie's Desk. Today on the desk we have two books. One is a preliminary draft of Father Carroll's famous book, Blindness, what it is, what it does, and what to do about it. The other is the published version. The preliminary draft is this Bible-sized tome that I got on eBay. It was sent to this priest, Alf Jacobson, I believe, in Vermont, who knew Father Carroll. It's about a foot long, 8 inches wide, and 4 inches thick. It's big. And it's just typed. So, I don't know, mimeographed. It's from the late 50s, early 60s. Anyway, so there's that, and then there's the published copy. They're both folded open to some pages I'm going to reference. And then in the far corner of the desk, there's a little board with some cool vintage pins that I'll describe in more detail, and some coins for size reference. Because I want to talk about sick vintage pins and my jean jacket game, and also talk about O&M history. So I'm gonna sit down and jump right in. Gosh, where to start? I'll start with a really cool. Gosh, I don't even know where to start. This is so hard. Okay, I'll start with the pin. Okay, we start with the objects here. I'll try this. I'll hold this up. So in my hand, there's a little enamel pin. It is a white cane pin. It was probably made by the Lions Club before 1948, because it looks like a little orthopedic cane, but it is painted red and white. And I got this for my jean jacket because it's cool. It was probably like a fundraising thing the Lions Club did. But this cane is different from the cane that came after it, the Hoover cane, the long cane. This is a symbol of blindness, and in that sense it was very complicated. But the long cane is a tool. That's different. This cane is short. You know, my long cane, I'm not that tall, but it's 60 inches because I walk fast. And I'll show you guys that. But okay, so this is a symbol of blindness, pre-1948, pre the Hoover cane, okay? I'm gonna put that down and then talk about how the cane is described in Father Carroll's book. And I'll also grab this cane. Okay, so how does that little tiny cane end up turning into this giant long cane? I now have my Revolution 60-inch graphite cane that I got from my instructor, Carroll, in my university program. I'm not visually impaired, I just am an O&M. So that's why I have my cane. So I have this here. So how do you go from the orthopedic support cane to this cane here? And what's the difference? Because this is a very different tool than a support cane, but it's still called a cane. So I want to talk a little bit about the writing and what's cool about having the preliminary draft, right, that Father Carroll sent out to people. In the published draft is you can see some of the ideas change and coalesce. So I'll start with the published version because it's one of my favorite descriptions of a cane. So I'll move the published version underneath the camera. Okay. So this is the sentence that I really love. It's on page 137 of the published version of Blindness to describe a cane. The cane, which does serve the blinded person's needs, is actually not a cane at all. In the traditional sense, it is a kind of antenna, a wand, like the water dowsers. This is the Hoover cane, which will be described later in this chapter. Let me read that again, because I kind of butchered it a little bit. The cane which does serve the blinded person's needs is actually not a cane at all in the traditional sense. It is a kind of antenna, a wand, like the water dowsers. This is the Hoover cane, which will be described later in this chapter. Okay, so instead of becoming a symbol of blindness, the Hoover technique, right, which is invented in the VA hospital system by the Army at a couple different places, one of which is represented by another sweet vintage pin. This is the Hines Blind Center, Hines Blind Rehab Center pin, established in 1948. It is circular. There's like a concentric circles, I guess. So the outer circle is blue and it has text in gold, and then the inner circle has sort of the crest, and it has an eagle on a shield with an anchor and a gun crossing it, because it's like all the service branches, and then it has two crooked canes crossed at the top of the shield. It's pretty sweet. Got it in my jean jacket with my other pins. I like it a lot. About the size of a quarter. Okay, so at this place, you know, with Richard Hoover, who's this ophthalmologist, and C. Warren Bledsoe, and oh God, I always mess up his name because it's similar to a famous NFL quarterback. So it is Russ Wilson, I think. He was a blinded a veteran who really sort of revolutionized cane technique. And so it's different from a support cane. It's longer. It's an extension of your hand. It's like a wand, an antenna. It's resonant. So the first canes that they got were aluminum. They still had the crook on the end for convenience. You could kind of rest it in your arm when you're hanging out and standing. They didn't have an elastic coming out of them like they do today. They weren't collapsible. They were just aluminum or steel. They didn't have fancy tips. They had wooden dowels or plastic, but they were still long canes, and they used touch technique and all those skills that we use today. I'm just kind of spinning the cane in my fingers. It's all folded up. I love this thing. Store your canes unfolded though, because the elastic is what ages in these things, and the tips. But if you store it straight up, then you will avoid prematurely aging the elastic. You don't want it to fall apart on you. That's why you always want to have a backup cane. So that was the really elegant description that made it into the published work. But then let's dig into the same part in the original draft. So big book back on the table. Okay. It is questionable if the word cane properly describes this particular travel tool. Certainly, it does not suggest to the average person an instrument of this length and shape. Staff, rod, or crozier more quickly brings the particular tool to mind. I think the word crozier is probably more familiar to a priest that was born in 1909. Whatever. In addition to being a bumper to ward off bumps, this cane or staff is particularly an antenna, which greatly increases the range of a person's touch of his cutaneous and kinesthetic senses and allows him to gather information about his environment. So that's very good, that's very true. I can see why he changed the sentence, in addition to being a bumper to ward off bumps. It's very true, but you know, whenever you're using like the same word multiple times in a clause, not even a sentence, you know, you might edit it out. But you know, that's why he didn't want this published, but before it was read through. But now it's interesting to look at it to see how the philosophy sort of solidified right before it published. And I'll make more videos about that. But I really just wanted to talk about these two descriptions of the cane and how actually, one of the asterisks here is there is not complete agreement as to the optimum length of such a cane. Still true today, guys. Most of the agencies teaching the special cane technique insist that they be at least long enough to reach the elbow. And two rehabilitation centers, asterisks, which place heavy emphasis on cane technique, use long canes long enough to reach to the breastbone. Okay, so that asterisk refers to the Hines Hospital and the St. Paul's Rehabilitation Center, which became Carroll Center for the Blind. Right, so that's how we have this vintage pin. Ba-boom! Hines Center, and then Hines Hospital in the book, and St. Paul's Carroll Center. So those are the two places. They're really emphasizing long cane technique and bringing it to the general population because it was just available to those in the military. And that's not totally fair, right? So that's a little bit about the origin of the long cane and some sweet vintage pins and some books. So I don't even know what playlist I'm gonna put this in, guys, but I'll put it out there. So thank you for watching. Please comment with any questions or corrections. And yeah, have a good one. Bye.